Blood-red banners flutter in Tiananmen Square, and beneath them stands a man who will reshape China with an iron fist and a philosopher's tongue. His hands, soft from years of scholarly pursuits, would soon be stained with the blood of millions. This is the story of Mao Zedong, the poet who became a titan, the teacher who became a tyrant, and the son of a farmer who would harvest the souls of his people in pursuit of utopia. In the humid heat of Hunan Province, 1893, a child was born to a prosperous farmer, a boy who would learn early that power grew from the barrel of a gun, but first from the fertile soil of resentment. Young Mao, forced to bow before his father in rigid Confucian tradition, cultivated a garden of rebellion in his heart. The seeds planted in those early years would bloom into a revolution that would shake the world's most populous nation to its core. The young scholar's mind was a crucible where Chinese tradition melted into Western philosophy. In the libraries of Changsha, Mao devoured radical texts like a starving man at a feast. His intellectual appetite proved insatiable, consuming everything from Marxist theory to traditional Chinese literature. But beneath his scholarly exterior lurked a calculating mind that would later orchestrate campaigns of terror with the same methodical precision he once applied to his studies. Psychologically, Mao embodied a complex tapestry of contradictions. His writings revealed a romantic soul capable of exquisite poetry, yet his actions displayed a chilling pragmatism about human suffering. Dr. Jisui Li, his personal physician, would later describe a man who could discuss philosophy over breakfast and sign death warrants over dinner, showing no more concern than if he were ordering tea. The Long March of 1934 transformed Mao from a regional leader into a messianic figure. As 100,000 communist fighters trekked 6,000 miles across China's most treacherous terrain, Mao's legend grew with every step. Those who survived spoke of his uncanny ability to inspire hope in the darkest hours, even as their comrades fell to frostbite, starvation, and nationalist bullets. This crucible of suffering forged his leadership style, a blend of inspirational rhetoric and ruthless pragmatism. By 1949, when Mao stood atop the gate of heavenly peace and proclaimed the People's Republic of China, his psychological metamorphosis was complete. The idealistic young scholar had become the supreme leader of the world's largest nation. His personality cult reached religious proportions. His little red book became a sacred text, his image an icon of devotion, his words the gospel of a new China. The Great Leap Forward of 1958 revealed the darkest corners of Mao's psyche. In his determination to transform China from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse overnight, he displayed a devastating combination of hubris and detachment from reality. As millions starved in what would become history's deadliest famine, Mao remained convinced of his infallibility. The death toll, estimated between 15 and 55 million, became mere statistics in his grand vision. The Cultural Revolution emerged from Mao's paranoid twilight years, a chaos unleashed by a man who saw enemies in every shadow. He turned China's youth into Red Guards, weapons of cultural destruction who would tear apart the very fabric of Chinese society. Families turned against families, students against teachers, children against parents. The psychological trauma inflicted during these years would echo through generations. Behind closed doors, Mao lived like an emperor while preaching egalitarianism. His private life was a study in contradictions, the champion of peasants who never returned to work the fields, the advocate of sexual liberation who collected young women like rare books, the revolutionary who created a new elite class while claiming to destroy class distinctions. Those closest to him described a man who could be charming and cruel in the same breath. He possessed an encyclopedic memory for classical Chinese literature, but ordered the destruction of countless ancient texts and temples. He could quote Confucius while dismantling every principle the sage had taught. His personal doctor noted his fear of dentists, but not of ordering mass executions. The aging chairman's final years were marked by physical decay and political maneuvering. As his body failed him, his grip on power remained vice-like. Even on his deathbed, he orchestrated political purges and ideological campaigns. His last breaths were drawn in a room where few dared to speak above a whisper, even as millions outside chanted his name like a prayer. When Mao died in 1976, China had been transformed beyond recognition. The nation had nuclear weapons, a unified political system, and near-universal literacy. It also had mass graves, re-education camps, and a population traumatized by decades of political chaos. His body, preserved in crystal and displayed in Tiananmen Square, became a monument to the cost of utopian dreams. Historians continue to grapple with Mao's legacy. Was he the great unifier who modernized China, or the architect of history's most costly social engineering experiments? The answer perhaps lies in understanding the psychological forces that drove him: the wounded pride of a farmer's son, the romantic idealism of a young revolutionary, and the paranoid isolation of supreme power. The magnitude of Mao's impact on China defies simple measurement. Under his rule, infant mortality dropped dramatically, women gained unprecedented rights, and China emerged as a global power. Yet these achievements came at a horrific human cost, with some scholars estimating that up to 70 million Chinese died unnatural deaths during his reign. Today, Mao's portrait still hangs over Tiananmen Square, his face an immutable mask gazing out over a China he would hardly recognize. The nation has embraced capitalism while maintaining the authoritarian political system he built. His ideology has been selectively preserved, cherry-picked to justify whatever policies the current leadership desires. In the end, Mao Zedong embodied the ancient Chinese concept of yin and yang, creation and destruction bound together in an endless dance. He was a poet who wrote with the ink of blood, a visionary whose dreams became nightmares, a liberator who became a jailer of minds and bodies. As the sun sets over modern China, casting long shadows across Tiananmen Square, one truth remains. In the great ledger of history, Mao's entries are written in red, the color of revolution, the color of blood, and the color of a dawn that consumed its children.